What is the best school? In our next lesson, something unexpected happened. One of the students, a young woman sitting near the front, raised her hand. Her face lit up as she began to speak. "Excuse me," she said, a bit nervous but clearly eager to ask her question. "Next week I'm heading back home and I really want to keep learning English. But here's the thing, I don't know where to start. There are so many schools back in my country and I have no idea how to choose the right one. I want to make sure I'm picking a good school, but honestly I'm not sure what to look for. How do I know if a school is good? Can you help me?" Her question instantly grabbed everyone's attention, including mine. It wasn't something I had given much thought to before. As I looked around, I could see the other students were also intrigued. We were all from different parts of the world, with our own stories and reasons for being here. But this felt like a question that any of us could have asked. I hadn't thought about what would happen once our lessons were over, what the next step would be for me or for the others. Her voice was filled with both curiosity and concern, and I could sense a mix of excitement and nervousness as she talked about returning home. I wondered how I'd feel in her shoes, trying to continue this journey in a new environment. It was a reminder that learning didn't stop once we left the classroom. There was a whole world of choices ahead, and she, like all of us, wanted to make the right one. The room grew quiet as we all waited for the teacher's response, and I realized that this moment was about more than just picking a school. It was about figuring out how to move forward, how to keep growing, even when the path wasn't clear. During one of our lessons, the teacher said something that really stuck with me. It all started when one of the students asked a question that seemed to catch everyone's interest. She raised her hand and, with a thoughtful look on her face, asked, "How do I choose a good school when I go back home to continue learning English?" The whole class grew quiet, waiting for the teacher's response. Our teacher, always calm and thoughtful, took a moment before answering. Then he smiled, nodded, and said, "That's a very good question." He paused again, as if thinking carefully about how to explain. We all leaned in a little, eager to hear what he had to say. "I believe," he continued, "that when you read, listen, and speak a lot, you don't always need to go to a school to learn English. You can learn it naturally, just by using the language in your everyday life." I could see a few heads nodding around the room, including mine. It made sense. We were living in England, surrounded by English every day, and we could already feel ourselves improving just by being here. But then, the teacher added something that surprised me. "However," he went on, "if you want to pay for your education and you have the means, a good teacher can help you speed up the process of learning. A teacher can guide you, correct your mistakes, and give you the structure you need to improve faster. So, it's not always about choosing a school, but more about finding the right teacher who understands what you need." His words hung in the air for a moment, and I found myself thinking about them long after he finished speaking. The idea that I didn't always need a formal school to keep learning was both freeing and a bit scary. I had always thought that schools were the only way to truly master something. But now, the teacher was suggesting that if I kept surrounding myself with English, reading, listening, speaking, it could happen naturally. Still, the thought of having a good teacher, someone to guide me through the process, was comforting. It made me wonder what my next steps would be and how I would continue this journey when my time in England came to an end. One day in class, After a student had asked about how to choose a good school for learning English, our teacher shared some advice that seemed practical, but also sparked my curiosity. He looked around the room, making sure we were all listening, and then said, "If you want to know if your school is really good, there's a simple way to check." We all leaned in a bit, wondering what he would say next. "Before you start your first lesson," he continued, "go to a website called www.testlanguages.com. It's a good place to see how many English words you already know." I could see a few people scribbling the name of the website down in their notebooks, myself included. He paused for a moment, letting the idea sink in, before going on. "Once you've taken the test and you know your starting point, here's what you do. After about 5 lessons at your new school, take the test again." His eyes moved across the room as if he was making sure we understood, and then he added, "You'll be able to see how many new words you've learned in just a short time." I thought that was such an interesting idea. It seemed like a simple way to track progress, to really know if what we were learning was working. The more he talked about it, the more it seemed like something I would want to try myself. It wasn't just about learning a few new words here and there. It was about seeing the bigger picture of how much I could improve in a short amount of time. I found myself already planning to visit the website, curious to see where I stood and how much I could grow in the weeks ahead. The idea that I could measure my own progress outside of the classroom made me feel a bit more in control of my learning journey. As the teacher finished explaining, I could sense that everyone else was thinking the same thing. It was a small tool, but it felt like it could make a big difference in how we approached learning English. In one of our lessons, after we had been talking about how to choose a good school and how to measure our progress, our teacher gave us another piece of advice that really stuck with me. He was pacing slowly at the front of the room, thinking for a moment. And then he turned to us and said, "If you're happy with your progress, then keep paying for your lessons. It's important to know that you're improving, but there's something else that's just as important." He paused and we all waited, curious to hear what it was. "You need to enjoy the process," he said with a smile. "If you don't enjoy your lessons, if you're not looking forward to the next one, then something's wrong." His words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. I had always thought of learning as something that took hard work and focus, but I hadn't really considered the idea of enjoying it. He continued, "It's not just about sitting in a classroom and doing exercises. It's about having fun with the language. Every activity you do with English should bring you some kind of joy. Whether it's reading, speaking, or even doing your homework, you should feel like you're growing and having fun at the same time." I thought about how I had been approaching my own studies. Sometimes I got frustrated when I didn't understand something right away, or when I felt like I wasn't improving fast enough. But now the idea of enjoying every lesson, every little step in the process, made me see things differently. I realized that if I wasn't having fun while learning English, I might be missing out on a big part of the experience. The teacher's words stayed with me for the rest of the day. They made me think not just about how I was learning, but why I was learning in the first place. This journey wasn't just about mastering a language. It was about enjoying the journey itself. In one of our final lessons, after we'd been discussing how to find a good school and ways to continue learning, the teacher shared something that caught everyone's attention. We were wrapping up the day when he casually mentioned, "Oh, and by the way, I also give private lessons via Skype." His voice was calm, but I could tell he was serious. If any of you are interested, I can teach you online. So if you don't find a good school in your hometown or if you want extra help, you can always contact me. I'll be happy to assist." There was a brief pause as the room went quiet. You could feel the curiosity in the air. Most of us had been wondering what we'd do once this course ended. Finding a good teacher, especially one who knew us and our learning styles, wasn't easy. Then, one of the students sitting near the back raised her hand. She had a big smile on her face as she said, "This is great. I'd love to have private lessons with you via Skype." She was excited, and I could see why. The idea of continuing with the same teacher who had guided us all this time felt like a good way to keep progressing, even after leaving England. As I listened to their conversation, I found myself thinking about it too. The thought of continuing my lessons, even from my home country, sounded appealing. It was comforting to know that even after leaving, we didn't have to say goodbye to everything we'd learned here. The opportunity to have lessons over Skype felt like a bridge between the present and the future, a way to keep the momentum going. It made me feel less anxious about leaving and more excited about what lay ahead. I could see the other students nodding, some already making mental notes to reach out to the teacher after the course. This option made the idea of going back home feel a little less daunting, knowing we had a way to stay connected to our learning journey. One afternoon in class, something happened that completely surprised me. The teacher had been talking about ways we could keep improving our English after the course, and then almost casually, he mentioned something I hadn't thought about before. "If any of you are interested," he said, "I also offer private lessons via Skype. So even if you go back to your countries and can't find a good school, you can still continue learning with me online." I sat up a little straighter in my chair, my mind racing. This was great news. I had no idea it was even possible to have a private lesson with him after we left. The idea filled me with relief because, like some of the others in the class, I was soon heading back to my country. I had been worrying about how I'd keep learning once I left England, wondering if I'd lose all the progress I had made here. It wasn't easy finding good English teachers back home, and I didn't want to fall behind. Now, knowing that I could continue lessons with the same teacher, someone who knew my strengths and weaknesses, felt like a lifeline. I could already imagine sitting at my desk, connecting with him over Skype, continuing to improve my English even though I'd be thousands of miles away. I wasn't the only one excited by this news. I could see a few other students glancing at each other with the same look of surprise and excitement. We had all grown so comfortable learning with this teacher, and now we didn't have to worry about starting over with someone new. I knew for sure I was going to sign up for these lessons as soon as I got home. The thought of keeping that connection, of not losing the rhythm we'd built, was such a relief. It felt like I was no longer just a student in a classroom. I was part of a much bigger journey that didn't have to end when I left England. This was just another step forward,